afternoon, everyone. I'm Eileen Jackham. I'm warden of the Borough of Stonington. It's my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to St. Mary's for the Spirit of the Borough 1900 through 1950. I want especially to thank Father Gagan for allowing us to use St. Mary's Hall this afternoon. I'm extremely enthusiastic about today's presentation because to me it exemplifies two defining features of Stonington Borough. That is, its sense of history and its sense of community. Today we are privileged to share the recollections of those who have known Stonington all their lives. Their stories will paint a marvelous picture of life in Stonington Borough in the first half of the century. You will also hear woven throughout these stories, these reminiscences, the sense of community and commitment to community, which has been an unchanging constant in Stonington throughout the century. I must call your attention to a small note in the program which says there are to be no commercial reproductions of this presentation without the written consent of the Borough of Stonington. Finally, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you the guiding spirit of today's presentation, Rose Rappo. Rose is One quick thought, Rose has worked tirelessly to put this program together for us. She currently serves the borough as chairman of the Right-of-Way Committee, a committee whose activities have blossomed into today's marvelous presentation. And with that said, allow me to introduce Rose Rappo.
I too want to welcome you all. This is home. This is Stonington. This is the borough. We have a lot of outsiders, and I welcome you too. This presentation is under the aegis of the Borough Rights of Way Committee, formed in 1987 to preserve the heritage of the rights of way and public passageways. This afternoon is a presentation of the physical history, part of our heritage, and reflection of the small borough of 5.7 acres. Change has occurred over the years, and the speakers here today are generous to share recollections and experiences as the borough existed years ago. My special thanks to all the participants who have devoted countless hours in their love and affection of the borough, and to everyone who has helped to make this presentation possible. I will now turn this program over to Mary Boatwright, our moderator, and Bob Galtley, our timer. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for coming. I'm looking forward to this as much as you are. I'd like to introduce Dorothea Gould to be our first speaker because I think she's the senior member of the roster of stars that we have here.
Do you want to stand up? You want to stand up or you want to sit? You want to have the...
I am a transplant from Massachusetts since 1917, and next week I will be 93, so I think I'll stick around another while. We came to Stonington due to my stepfather, sea captain's occupancy of the shipyard, buildings, World War I ships. Now the location of the town dock. We rented apartments and rooms and so forth at Captain Jimmy's Inn on Logs Hill and at Andrew Perry's home on Main Street with other sea captain families. The Perry's daughter, Anna, took me to my first day of school. We finally moved to the Anchorage in 1922 on Main Street, made so by me after the much damage in the 38 hurricane. It was our first lovely home for 45 years. As a youngster, I went to the movies on Tuesdays and Saturdays in the Borough Hall. The big event. My mother gave me 25 cents spending money of the week. 15 cents was for the church envelope and 10 cents for the movie. That was my first lesson in economics. Our Girl Scout troop. 1919 was the first troop in Connecticut and was named after our state flower, the laurel. My chums growing up were Lucy Cheesero, Alice Powers, Emily Robinson, Elizabeth Browning, and others. There were always interesting pastimes like playing and chasing Mr. Whalen's beautiful horses in the attic behind his house on Main Street, the stately home now known as Beale House. The cook invited us in sometimes to sit in the back stairs and listen to Mr. Whalen's organist play. It was lovely. We were then rewarded with cookies and milk for being well behaved. I remember the trolleys filled with screaming kids in anticipation of the Sunday school picnics at Atlantic Beach, now Misquamicut. What memories! There were rides and merry-go-rounds and swimming in the surf and all kinds of fun things. Sledding on Sal Pinker's Hill and Brayton's Dewey Square. Most people don't know where that is, but my introduction to deep saltwater swimming came as a complete surprise. Elizabeth Browning and I, dressed in our Sunday school best, went down to Dempster's Dock. Most people walk down there. Of course, we shouldn't have been there, I suppose, but Johnny Dennis and other young blades pushed us overboard. Full. We came up bubbling, looking like drowned rats. My dear mother was aghast at the sight. She was always aghast at something.
I'd like to ask Mike Francis to be number 2, please.
Excuse me. I know there are many people here today, and I went through the hurricane on September 21st, 1938. It was also my birthday, and I was 21 years old on that day. My friend, the late Jerry Travis, came to pick me up at my home on Trumbull Street, and we went to Westerly to do some shopping. And on the way over, the wind was blowing quite hard and it was raining at that time. After we finished our shopping, we headed home and we tried to get into the village at the Elm Street crossing. But there was a huge tree across the street on the corner of Cutler and Elm Street. At that time, there were 3 entrances to the borough, one on Elm Street, one on Water Street, and one on Main Street. We headed back towards Wiggity Park, and when the car started bouncing all over the road, we had to get out and walk to a house that's now located next to the motel in Wiggity Park. We stayed there during the height of the storm with all the buildings flying around us. When the wind died down, we started to walk across the fields, and we came out on the top of North Main Street, somewhere around Mr. Wimpiner's house. Every tree on North Main Street was down, telephone poles were down, wires, and we had to jump over, under, and around them to get down. Where the light is today on North Main Street, we could see the train wreck down on the bridge by Waterwater Club. There was one car hanging off, and the lights were on, and this is when we realized that this was just more than an ordinary storm. We continued to walk down. We thought we could get into the village, but the water was so high where the soccer field is now that we had to swim into Delagrage's garage, which is now where the Hopsicord factory is. And we stayed there on the second floor that night with a lot of other people, several of the passengers from the train wreck. The next morning, we started to walk down into the village, and this is when we were told that Jerry's brother, sister, and grandfather and grandmother were lost on Wall Street when the water came over. It was quite a day. It's one that I will never forget. My 21st birthday. It has been 61 years, I believe, and it's just like it happened yesterday. Thank you.
Speaker, I'd like to be Mrs. Garrett.
I have another story about the hurricane, and it was a little bit different. I was teaching school at that time, and when the wind began to come up and blow things against the windows, we were told to take the children down to the first floor and seat them on the corridor floor. Then they brought the piano out from the 8th grade, so we had to sing along all afternoon. We had all kinds of entertainment, songs and stories and so forth, having no idea what was happening outside until the parents came for the children. And finally, when they'd all gone, except one, Richard James, and he was left alone. So I told him not to worry. Wherever I stayed that night, he would stay with me, and I tried to get him home the next day because they lived on the Westerly Road. So that all afternoon, that was a very happy time. And no matter what the events were during my lifetime, there was always music. So the important thing about this story is that the friendship that was started with the James family has lasted for 4 generations and is still going strong. From there, I want to talk about the block dance that we had on VJ Day when the armistice was signed. My friends and I were out on the streets, and everybody came out of the houses, and the sidewalks and roads were crowded with people, and they were hugging each other and kissing each other. And I said to my friends, let's have a little celebration. So we went down to my house on Trumbull Street, took out the accordion, and I sat down in the chairs also, and we sat down under the lamppost. So I started to play, and of course we started to dance and sing, and pretty soon we had a crowd. In no time, they came from all sections of the town. Pretty soon the Portuguese people came out, the old-timers, and they had their circular dances. And they danced the bars, the chamaritas, the palmas, and the fudades. And we not only enjoyed them, but pretty soon everybody was taking part in their dance. It didn't make any difference whether you were Portuguese or American or what. Everybody joined in and had fun. And the police came and saw what we were doing, so they shut off all the traffic and Omega and Hancock Street. Then the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the Christmas caroling that the Portuguese had. It was a little bit different from ours. Just a few people would start the caroling and go and sing outside the closed door and sing a hymn that said, "We have come to sing to the Christ child. Please let us in." So they would wait until that hymn was finished, and then they'd open the doors, and then the Christ child was always decorated on a table or on an altar with candles and flowers and so forth. And the dining room table was always set with a lot of goodies. So then after we had sung and had our goodies, then those people joined, and we went from house to house, and they would sing right along the road, and so that everybody could hear them when they came to the next house. I had a teacher at the last day of school. She said, when I was going to teach school, she said, "Don't be like a teacher that taught school for 50 years but kept right on talking." But I wanted to mention also that we provided our own music. We had a band that played for all the parades we had in town. We had an orchestra that played for all the dancing, of which I was a part. I played when I was all through high school. I played in an orchestra, and so that we had our own music. And then we had Borough Hall, where we had plays and shows and carnivals and fairs and all kinds of things. We had everything right here that we needed. And no matter what we did, there was always music. And I mean, if you didn't know what to do, we always get a gang together and just sing or play and sing, and we had a lot of fun. So music was a great part of my life.
The next speaker to be Henrietta Mayer.
growing up in the village was a great deal of fun because there wasn't any place in the village or any place around the water that we were that we weren't allowed to play or to use. So we would, just as soon as the warm weather came, the first thing that we wanted to do was to go swimming or to get out in a boat. So my friend Colleen and I would always try to borrow a rowboat. First we would try Mr. Hoadley because he lived on Ash Street, and that was just a very short row over to Sandy Point. And Sandy Point was always the place that we wanted to go because it was very sandy, and all of our other swimming places were either rocky or we had to dive in. So this one day that Mr. Hoadley wouldn't let us take his boat, so then we decided to try Elwell Thomas. Well, he finally consented to let us take his boat, and so we rowed to Sandy Point, and most of the time we would start out rowing with, she would have one oar and I would have the other oar. Well, coming back, it got a little rough, and then when we got off the end of the point, of course, we were going around in circles because it was very rough there with the current. And we kept going around and around. Finally, I said, Colleen, give me the oar, I'll row. So then I took the oars and rowed into Elwell Thomas's dock. Well, we got to the dock, and I held on to the dock. Colleen jumps out of the boat, and she gets up on the dock. Well, I'm starting to go to get onto the dock, and I have one leg on the dock and one leg in the boat, and there I go, I fell in. So I was so surprised because this was the end of April, and I said, oh, Colleen, the water is so warm, come on in. So she jumps in too. We were fortunate that she only lived up the street a little bit, and then we had to go home and tell her mother how we got wet, but it was all right. And we had many incidents of growing up, and the water was always so much a part of our life, and boats. And then another thing that I remember is that we had a family tradition. My great-uncle George Francis baked beans for the family every Saturday for 30 years. And it got to the point, of course, where I did not like baked beans anymore. I was tired of them. But he made beans for the Perrys, for the Francis, for the Maries, and for the Mello families. And every Saturday, it was our job to go down and pick up our pot of baked beans. Well, we did this, as I say, and it came to the point where I thought, oh, God, I hope I don't have to have beans again. My sister Mary Ann tells me that after I was married, then she told my Uncle George, I don't like those red kidney beans. So he said, okay. Then he said, I'll make you some white ones. So she used to go down and she would get her white beans. My father, he loved those red beans until the day he died. He never stopped.
Be the next speaker, please.
Well, I was born in Stonington. I was born near the school. And from there we moved to Wall Street. And my father got a job with the waterworks, the Mystic Valley Water Company. And he worked there for around 13 years. And then we moved to a little house at the bottom of the street. And we lived there for 3 or 4 years. And then Whalen was the president of the water company, Spaulding was the vice president, and George Robinson was the superintendent. And Joe Hammond was the foreman. He was made a foreman of the men working on the waterworks. So after he worked there for 13 years, there was Wall Street, the first house going down where the Harveys lived there. And they moved out. So the boss comes to my father and says, well, he says, there's a house, the big house, is empty, and you ought to move up to the big house. But this was all done undercover. Nobody knew what was going on. So he told him no, he couldn't go because he was paying $7 a month for the rent and the other house, and it was 9. So he couldn't afford it. So that went on for a while, and they come back, and he told him the same thing again. And he still didn't go along with it. So then he comes over to my brother, he was a truck driver, and he says, get a couple of men and empty the truck out with all the tools and get down there and take all the furniture and move it up to the big house. So they did that, and then they came to my father, and he says, well, now you've got to go with me. So they took him to what was the Borough Hall, not the Borough Hall, was considered the town hall. It was a little place near the Dimmick House that Eli Hinckley was the town clerk. And come to find out, they asked him for $1, and he didn't have it. So the boss had to borrow it, let him take $1, and he paid for it. And then he took all the houses. He owned all the houses in the street. There was 12 of them. He had everybody gave them all, each one their house, gave them their deeds, and gave us the deed for $1. We ended up with it. That was the reason why he wanted us to move up to the new house. Then he turned around and he would always go to the store. They had Carl Rotten had his father had 2 stores. One was a shoe store, and the other one was a clothing store. And he says, now I want you to find out who all the Portuguese kids were that needed clothes to go to school, and see to it that they get all the clothes and shoes they want. And then the next thing he done was he went to all the churches, and he had them, this was back in 1921, and he had them build the coal bins of St. Mary's and the church, the school, the one on school, up near the school, and the other church, and there was another church that was across from Spalding's house. No one ever knew who was paying for the whole thing. And then his son found out, and then he went down to John Bellis's and had him order cement, that he was going to cement the whole borough. But his son found out about it and cut the whole thing off. He tried to get the houses back, but it was all legally done. So he didn't get to cement the town, but the son had him put away. So we all ended up with a house for $1.
I learned my trade from Leon Piper, my father. He was a master mason, bricklayer, stonemason, and plaster. And I say that because I have a little goodies here. I have 2 bills. I had 2 bills that were sent to the same family. The first one. Just shut it up. Shut it up. Now, the first one is May 1931 to the Stone Acres Farm. The other bill from me is May 12th 81, 50 years to the day, to the week. And on the 1931 bill, labor was 90 cents an hour. On May 81, labor was $14.50. Now, the other story I have, I was an apprentice boy for my father. You know what happens when the apprentice boys get on the job. They got to do all the cleanups and do dirty work. So we were replacing a firebox on 25 Main Street. And I'm not sure whether it was around 1940 we did this. Well, anyway, we were taking the rubble out, and my father looked at me and he said, "Hey, Rapage," and that Pashki means, "Hey, boy." When you heard that, you knew dark clouds were coming. So I said, "What happened now?" He said, "I have to come from the old country to teach you your history." And I looked and I found this great shot when we fielded from the War of 1814. Now, I think the people lived there with the Boers. So when I cleaned it up, he said, "You have to give that to Mr. Moore." So when I gave it to Mr. Moore, he looked at it and he said, "You're an honest man, you may keep it." So I've had it for 58 years. That's my story.
Next one is Francis Medeiros.
In 1929, my parents moved down to Hancock Street and bought the house that was the Manooks, the Andrews family. And across the street was Joe Perry's grocery store, and upstairs was the band room where we listened to the Stonington band practice for their festivals. And down in the back and around the sheds where we went swimming, and with all the sewers running all around and my brothers went crabbing for rock crabs. They used the crabs for blackfish bait, and they had to earn some money in the summertime. And I went with them many times. So one day I decided I wanted to go alone. So I went and had to get the nets, and I had to get the bait and tie them in the nets, and I had a small barrel, wooden barrel, and I put that all in a rowboat that we had to ask always. We never owned one. And so I got that in the rowboat, and off I went down to the back of the school in Rocky Island Shores, and I set my nets, and by the time I got through the last one, the first one was full of crabs, and no time at all, the barrel was full of crabs. So I was happy, and I came home, rolling home, and I got to the dock, and I said, "Oh, I can't get this barrel up on the dock." It was too heavy, and so I had to walk down to the street where the boys were getting ready to go to the movies or someplace. They were dressed up. And I asked if one of them could please help me pick this barrel up off the boat. And, well, my brother-in-law, Tony Baloney, he said, "Oh, I'll go." And so he came down to the boat, and he started to pick up the barrel, and it tripped on the side of the boat. And off they went, both barrel and Tony went in the water. And so all I could do was grab my crabs, my So he did stand up in the water, and he helped me put the barrel up on the boat. And he got in, and we drained the water out, and he put the barrel up on the dock, and he brought it down to the yard, and his pants had shrunk. he couldn't go to the movies that night. But anyway, in the 38 hurricane, we're not allowed to live at home for 2 weeks. The stench that was in this town was terrible, and everything was flooded and dirty, and a lot of back houses had turned over. And so the WPA workers came down, and they were pumping out the cellars, And we went back home and we were cleaning up, and this man came upstairs and said to my mother, "Ma'am, do you have a Band-Aid?" He said, "I've been bitten." He said, "Your cellar is full of crabs."
Our next speaker is Rose Hirsch.
My dad purchased the one-family, it was a one-family home at that time, for $2,000 in 1925, and there was a nice yard alongside of it. I happened to find some tax bills, which the first one was in 1927, and the taxes were $36. 4 years later, they went up to $48. I also found a Mystic Power Company bill, 95 cents for 1 month. The arcade building is alongside of our property, and Harry and Lena Cheesebro had a candy store where I spent all my pennies. Sam Stewart was in the middle. He had a meat market. Staplin's had a fish market. Across the street was at Venus. He had a parlor, a pool parlor. And across from us was the Finland's Cove. So we had our own little community. We didn't even have to go very far to do all our shopping. But then along in 1938, when the Depression came and my dad worked at the American Velvet, they worked 6 months and they were off 6 months. And so he decided there would be a better way, there must be a better way to support his family. So that's when he started the store in the basement. And I remember in the winter, a whole group of young men that used to come down and play music in the back room. And so Dad had that for until 1951. And then he decided, well, my brother had come home from the service, and so he built the store that right now it's an antique shop. Because that's all we have now in Stonington.
Next speaker is Paul Steinhoff.
I'm going to set the stage here. It's about mid-1940s. It's 114 Water Street, corner of Water and Church Street. My parents had a delicatessen. It's now the site of the Water Street Antique Shop. We lived over the delicatessen, and at the time I was taking cornet lessons, and with my instructor we used to play duets. And in the summertime the windows are open, and the sound, of course, reverberated off the sides of the houses, and everything was pretty close. So we would play a duet, and the sound would go outside over Water Street, and pretty soon a small crowd gathered to hear us play, and they had a free concert for half hour, 45 minutes. When it was all over, we get a nice round of applause, because they were all standing in front of Bunny's store, and sitting on the steps between Bunny's and Freddie Fales' Portuguese Baker Shop, where they had a good chance to hear what was going on. That was real encouraging, because the round of applause gave us encouragement to come back again the following week and do it again. And then, as I got better playing my cornet, I started playing the Portuguese band. And some of the people I recall that were with us in there were the Souzas, Renderos, Lewis, Medeiros, and Joe Michael was the band leader at the time. And he was a very good band leader, and he had a lot of patience, but sometimes he'd get pretty frustrated with us. When he got frustrated, he started swearing in Portuguese, and he'd be waving his arms around. And at the time, I was pretty young, and I didn't know what he was talking about. After all, I was the only German in the Portuguese band, so I wasn't supposed to know. So we had a good time. We marched in all the local parades in the various towns around here. And I feel fortunate to have grown up in the borough at that time. We knew everyone knew everyone else's business. And it was really a good time in my life. You didn't have to worry about locking your doors at night. Everything was safe. And I feel very fortunate to have gone through that time. although at the time I thought it was kind of boring, but now I look back and I say it was really quite nice. So I want to thank you for letting me share those moments of my life with you, and I hope to have many more memories to share. Thank you.
Borough Flowers next.
Story that sticks out in my money was I was one of five, born on Trumbull Street in Stonington, and I had a sister, Evangeline, who used to make funnels. Now, funnels are the netting that go inside the lobster pots to keep the lobsters in from getting out. Well, my sister Evangeline did that, and the reason she used to do it for others was so that she could get paid, and at that time she was going to get married and had to earn her own money to get a wedding gown. I was insistent on going out lobstering with my father because I wanted to get on his good side, mainly because that was a reminder. Better? Okay. I was always reminded that the 3 was all he wanted. 3 kids was all he wanted. I wasn't supposed to be here. The doctor had told my mother that if she had another baby, she'd cure her migraines. So my father always used to say, yes, you mother's headache's all gone, but you give me mine. So I defied my father. I did anything I could to irritate him. So I thought, I gotta get on his good side. And I begged him to take me out lobstering with him, which was a side thing that he did other than this job at Aprin Machine Shop, which turned to be Universal and then Monsanto, now nothing. But at that time, he got so tired of hearing me beg him to go out lobstering that he took me out one day, which was after school, and while he kept the boat still, I would haul in the pot, because he would say, you hold the horse, keep the boat still, and I'll haul the pot. And I said, no, I want to hold the pot in. So I did, fell overboard. And now I didn't overhand swim, I just knew how to dog paddle. And my father got concerned, so he had this long stick in the boat with a hook. And he reeled me, hauled me in, period. So I get in the boat and I said to him, why didn't you let me stay? Why didn't you let me drown? You're always putting me out with your headaches. So why didn't you just let me go? No. Your job's not finished. You want to go lobstering? You're going to go lobstering. Now you better bring back down thing that you just lost. Okay? Now we're going to go out and get some more, which we did. I cried, but I did it, because I wanted to get on his good side, which didn't work. And when we got home, I told my mother what happened, and so she said, oh, she could think it was good enough for you. You begged your father, good enough for you. And that is what I remember most.
I'd like to hear from Eddie Piper.
Oh, gee. I'm Ed Piper, and I was born at 36 Main Street. The house isn't there anymore. But I wonder what the zoning board would do in the borough. The cement floor is there, the foundation is there. I wonder if they'd let them rebuild. And it was a lot of fun growing up in the borough. The hurricane took the house down, put 2 trees right through it. My father had bought 2 houses in the borough in 1917. He paid $800 a piece for them. Good thing he had to, because we had to tear one down and we lived in the other one on 10 Harmony Street. It was a lot of fun. We went down Wall Street where Christy lives. There was a neighbor down there, his, that used to like to sick the dog on me. He'd see me coming and he'd sick the dog. I'm still afraid of dogs. He'd laugh when I jumped up on a tree or up in a wall. But we had a lot of fun.
Thank you, Billy. I was thinking as I was sitting here that you really never escaped your maiden name. Mine was Cookie Previty. My dad was Wiggy. And I recently went through some papers, and I just found some memories of my father that may conjure up some memories of yours that I'd just like to tell you about. And one was that he remembered working at Billings' dock after school as a water boy on a boat, and it looked like a wood marsh, and it was owned by a captain whose last name began with a K. And this was during the mackerel run off of Watch Hill. And another thing that he did was he opened scallops for the boat Maurice, owned by Harold McLaughlin. And there's a picture of this boat Maurice in the room when you get to go in and see
the memorabilia in there. And the third thing that he did was that during World War II, he was an airplane spotter at Asakasa Brook. And he did that from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. During the week time. So those are my dad's memories. And as for myself, I remember kindergarten very clearly, because at the end of the year, we would have a maypole pageant. And Mr. Hauschel, who was the janitor at the school, would put up this ring of cotton ribbons in the middle of the room. There was a column in the middle of the room. The kindergarten room was at the Borough School front entrance, first room to the right. And so we would have this pageant, and we all had parts, and we all just felt so important. And I absolutely remember every word of the poem that I said. And as a tribute to the friendships that we made in Stonington, I was the class of 52 for kindergarten. And every summer, we have a reunion. Of course, I'll be using the maiden name of these friends. There's Terry Santos, Paula Victoria, Ann Scheidner, Donna Holland, and myself. And we have reunions every summer. And for our 45th reunion, we arranged to go and visit 3 of our teachers. And we went to visit Alvita Garrity and Nomi Cheesebro and Dot Provino. So I just, as I think about it, it was just such an important time and just a wonderful place to grow up, and certainly a dope school.
Another five.
Another 5. But you notice they let the older ones go first. As you've heard my brother say, my father owned homes at 36 Main Street and 10 Harmony Street, and most of my life was spent on that corner. The first 10 years at 36 Main Street until a hurricane destroyed the house, and then the rest of the time on Harmony Street. Now, contrary to what most people think, Borough wasn't inhabited totally by Portuguese people. Harmony Street alone was an ethnic melting pot. We had Italian, Portuguese, English, Irish, and an African-American family that lived down towards the Wall Street section. And we'd all gather around and have the greatest time singing and telling ghost stories and all kinds of things. But one of the things that I remember most of all was my mother, who spoke nothing but Portuguese, talking to Cookie's grandmother, I think it was, Mrs. Previty. Now, mind you, this all took place from their doorsteps. My mother on number 10, Harmony, and Mrs. Previty on number 7 across the street. And they're waving their arms at each other and talking away, my mother in Portuguese, Mrs. Previty responding in Italian. And I'm wondering how in the world they could understand each other. And in the background, the music was provided by Tony Previty, who was a would-be Gene Krupa. And his budding career started on his mother's pots and pans. Well, from there, we spent a lot of time down on Wall Street swimming. And let me tell you, that was an adventure because you never knew from day to day what color you were going to turn. I mean, one day would be purple, the next day would be red. And the dye from the velvet mill was slipping into our swimming area. But nobody knew anything about environment at that time, and we thought it was great fun. And I often wonder if Mr. Wimpheimer knew how much he contributed to our immune systems. My memories of the borough and of a New England fishing village are the town clock, the seagulls following the fishing fleet in with their catches, the bellboy, the foghorn, the 7 o'clock whistle. And I can tell you, when we grew up, that 7 o'clock whistle and that town clock sure were great things for our parents because they helped keeping curfews. At 7 o'clock, the whistle blew, and the younger folks knew they had to head for home, or boy, they were in big trouble.
And when you were a teenager, if you were out on a date and the curfew was at 11 and you happened to be sneaking in the house at 12, the town clock gave you away. You never get away with that kind of stuff. You heard my brother Leon say that he worked with my father, learned the trade from my father. Well, my father was an artist, and he was indeed. His mediums were stone and brick. And I'll always, always feel at home in the village. The Piper legacy will be there for many, many years. All I need to do is walk the streets and look at the beautiful sea walls and the brick garden walls, the chimneys, the sidewalks that he built, and I'm home.
Our last speaker is Art Edgar.
I get you talking to it. In the first place, I just like to find out what I'm doing up here with all these old people. Right, John? I remember Stonington Village when it was a nice place that was very active. Practically every store on Water Street was filled with something. And they were all working people, hard-working people. To go further down Water Street, we go to Finland's Dock. Finland's Dock had a large fishing fleet there, and so did the town dock. The fishing fleet at Finland's was all working, mostly Portuguese people. One boat that I do remember was operated by the Rogers. Their skipper was the father, the old man. They took him down to the boat and put him in the wheelhouse, strapped him to his chair, and he ran the boat. The reason they strapped him in was because he didn't have any legs. But they went fishing, and they fished quite regularly. And one night, coming back from offshore, they ran aground on Watch Hill Point. And they had to swim ashore. The two boys did, with the father with a hand on each shoulder, and they swam ashore with him. I don't know if many people could do that today. And somebody has already remarked about Finland's Dock. The big trucks that came up out of there loaded with barrels of fish and ice and water. And it would trail that water all the way up Water Street. In those days, Water Street was two-way traffic. I'd like to see them trying to get two ways up there now. As a matter of fact, the cars in those days were larger than they are now. But they'd make it. Of course, you saw a fish truck coming. You get out of the way. They had a hydrant in front of the store there at Grand and Water Street, which if you didn't get over to the left, you lost a fender. Stuck right out over the street. We had good times in Stonington Borough. I can remember a lot of them. I was going to tell you about the bootleggers, but they didn't like that.
Seven bottle rooms.
No, we had 8 bar rooms. 8 bar rooms, 4 package stores, and 6 barbers. It was a pretty busy place. But everybody made a living and everybody got along. And I come along in later years and spoiled it all. Today they don't seem to have fun. They're too busy criticizing everybody.
We had stores on Water Street that people got out and they swept their sidewalks and swept their gutters. I don't see any of that today. Antiques can't do that. I have a lot of fond memories of the borough. I worked there for 28 years. I played there as a child for 20-some before that. And it was always fun, there was always good people.
Tell them what you did for a living, though. Some of these people don't know.
Oh, I think they do.
He was chief of police.